Ryan Delgado, President of the Citizens for Extension of the James Zadroga Act. Vincent Vallilong, President of the New York NYPD Sergeants Benevolent Association. Mariama James, 9/11 community survivor. Nate Coward, Pentagon responder. Ben Shavat, Executive Director of Citizens for Extension of the James Zadroga Act. And all of the other advocates, responders, and survivors who are here with us, who have been fighting from the very beginning to make sure that the men and women who served so bravely and who were deeply affected have the benefits that they need to survive. We all have a story from 9/11. We remember where we were, what we saw, and how we felt. And for many here today and many more across the country, 9/11 left more than just a memory. Today, we'll hear from Mariama James, who was pregnant while she was living near the towers. She came home to find her apartment covered with a thick coat of ash. Since that day, Mariama and her 3 children have developed life-changing respiratory conditions. As a mother, I can only imagine what it must have been like to see your children, that 10-month-old baby, get sicker and sicker. Today, we'll also hear from Nate Coward, who responded to the attack on the Pentagon. As a member of the Army's 3rd Infantry Regiment, Nate spent weeks climbing in and out of the wreckage searching for remains. Now he's a disabled veteran who suffers from post-traumatic stress and sarcoidosis. Correct? Sarcoidosis. Nate and Mariama are just 2 of the thousands of people who are still suffering today because of 9/11. Children, firefighters, construction and recovery workers, and first responders. These people are now dealing with conditions like cancer, asthma, chronic respiratory disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Today, more people have died from 9/11 related conditions than died on the day of the attacks. Congress created the World Trade Center Health Program in 2011 to provide medical treatment and monitoring for many of these people. But the formula used to calculate how much money would be needed will not keep pace with anticipated costs. This is a bipartisan and nationwide issue. Injured and sick 9/11 responders and survivors are in every state and in 434 of our 435 congressional districts. My colleagues and I have delivered $1 billion for the program in the last year's government funding package, but it's still not enough. The World Trade Center Health Program still faces a substantial funding gap, and it still excludes many people like Nate, who responded to the attacks at the Pentagon and in Shanksville. All of these people deserve care. Our 9/11 Responder and Survivor Health Funding Correction Act would close the World Trade Center Health Program's funding shortfall. It will make changes to the funding formula so the program keeps pace with the anticipated costs, and it will finally allow excluded Pentagon and Shanksville responders to join. I'm grateful to all the advocates and allies who played a role in this fight, and I'm hopeful that we can strengthen the program in the future so that people like Mariama and Nate receive the health care and support that they need and deserve. I'd now like to bring up Senator Schumer, who, again, not only has fought for this every step of the way, but he is the one who gets it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand, and let me just repay the compliment. This wouldn't have all happened without Kirsten Gillibrand. Her dedication, her passion, her indomitability, going on the floor and sitting down hour after hour with colleagues from the other side of the aisle to get them support this legislation, and explaining to them carefully, patiently, and with passion what it is, has helped make this happen. So thank you, Kirsten. I want to thank Representative Garbarino. Where'd he go? There you are. We have always made this a bipartisan issue. That's the only way to get this done. And the fact that you are the lead sponsor in the House underlines that as well. We have Representatives Nadler, Menendez, Desposito, Booker, my good friend Senator Booker, my new congressman, Congressman Goldman, in his district. And I want to thank all the advocates. Without them, this wouldn't have happened. They have trod the halls of this place, many of them dying, but still being here. So let me just name them, even though Kirsten named them again. John Field, a great 9/11 advocate. Ed Kelly, my good friend with that great Boston accent. We love talking sports, from the International Association of Firefighters. Ryan Delgado from the President of the Citizens for the extension of the Zadroga Act. James McCarthy, Fire Officers, IAFF 852. Vincent Valalong, the Sergeants Benevolent Association of the Police Department. Someone I've become a good friend of, Mariana James, my dear, who has suffered so. Jamie Atkinson, First Ground Responder and Deputy Coordinator of Suffolk County. Nate Coward, a responder. We're going to hear from Nate today. Dr. Jacqueline Moline, Chairperson of the Department of Occupational Medicine. Ben Shavat, who has really been, I don't know where he went, but he's been here through thick and thin. He hides in the back usually. And everyone else. So, today we're standing with our nation's finest first responders, the firefighters, cops, EMTs, and more, who stepped up when our nation was hit hard, right in the gut. We're also joined by building trades workers who came the night of the attack, never left. Iron workers, carpenters, steam fitters, laborers, engineers. Every corner of the trades was there, month after month, even though they knew there was peril as they breathed this bad stuff into their lungs and into their bodies. And then, of course, the survivors and families of victims who still suffer the scars of that day, including neighbors who worked and lived nearby the site of these horrific attacks. As you know, among them was my daughter, so far so good with her, who went to Stuyvesant High School and now is the mother of two beautiful grandchildren we have. We're standing together today to bring attention to a grave issue. 21 years after the darkest day in our nation's history, many are still getting sick from the dust, the air, the poisons that spewed when those planes crashed across America. Too many. Yep, even 21 years after the attack, many Americans, not just in New York, but around the whole country, are still getting sick, finding out that they have been diagnosed with a 9/11 related cancer or health-related problem. These survivors, these first responders, have been able to count on the World Trade Center Health Program, which took us years to enact. For a while, people had nothing. But now we have it. And we're telling every one of them, we're going to make sure you get the care you need, just as we've made sure others have. Every time we have faced a challenge on this program, we've come together and we have overcome. We have passed every piece of legislation we have had to. When we worked those years to first pass the Zadroga Act, many logs, as many of the people around this room know, many logs were thrown in our way. The opposition was shocking, appalling, but we made the arguments, told the stories, won the day. I remember sitting down with some of these folks who seemed so intransigent, but as soon as the first responders came in and the others came in, they learned. I remember sitting down with my friend Coburn from Oklahoma, who was first adamant against it. And finally he said, yes, because of the people around this room. Yep, but still, far too many have gotten sick, and we need to add resources. They say, why do you need more money? Damn simple, because more people are getting sick. We have found more and more people are suffering more and more in different diseases from the stuff they breathed in. What do we say to them? Too late? Too bad? NFW, as we say in Brooklyn. That ain't happening. We have some Brooklynites here. So we're going to keep working, because every time they've thrown a log in our path, we've found a way around it. We've worked with all the groups mentioned here. As I said, advocates like Ben Shavat, and there was Susie Valentine also in the back. I saw her a minute ago. There you are. Hi, Susie. I knew her when she was Susie Spilka. With the New York State Federation of Labor, with Jerry Nadler, who was so good in the House, with the UFA, the UFOA, we've gotten the job done. And I believe working together, we're going to get the job done again and pass this legislation. As I said, the program faces a looming crisis, a critical shortfall 5 years from now. In last year's omnibus, when a few of the Republican leaders wouldn't allow our full proposal in the desired bill that we desired in the bill, I insisted we add $1 billion to the health program. That extends the deadline before we ran out of money and allows us to run the program till 2027, but the job is not done. And to anyone who says, well, you got till 2077, why are you here now? We all know the difficulties and the length of time it's taken. We don't want to wait. We want to get it done. Congress acted to avert an even sooner shortfall, as I said, by adding the $1 billion. But the job's not done. We know the World Trade Center program still needs at least $2 billion to avoid these same drastic consequences as soon as 2028. That is not a distant problem, not to the survivors, not to the first responders, not to those who knew they were down there at the pile and wonder what illness might come up next for them. We know that. We know that. And so that's why we have to act, and act as soon as we can. They deserve the certainty and peace of mind that they will have the support in the years in the future. We remember when Detective Louis Alvarez trekked to Washington and spent his last days fighting for more funds in the program. Our heroes deserve better than that. We've got to fix this before it becomes a crisis by passing the 9/11 Responder and Survivor Health Funding Correction and Improvements Act. We know the road ahead won't be easy again, but we know that every time we come together as a family, as advocates, as elected officials, as caring people, as Americans, we step past those articles. Let me tell you one person I remember who gives me strength to pursue this day in and day out. My dear late friend, Ray Pfeiffer. Many of you remember him. He tread these halls even when he was dying, demanding, sometimes begging for relief for his comrades so they wouldn't have to come down time after time after time. We don't need to have sick, ailing heroes come down to Washington again and again to demand only what they deserve. We came together. We won the Zadroga Act. We will win again. Ray, up there, my dear friend Ray, your spirit guides us. Your spirit motivates us. Your spirit pushes us forward. So, we're going to get this done. We're not going to stop until we get it done. We promise you that. Thank you, Senator Gillibrand.
Our next speaker is Congressman Garbarino.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. And I have to say also, just being here 2 years, I took over for Peter King, who led this issue in the House for many years. Working with you over the last few years, Senator Gillibrand, has been a real honor. You really care about this project so much, and I every time we talk about it, I can see that. So thank you so much. I also want to thank my other co-leads in the House. Congressman Nadler is the co-lead on the Democratic side, along with Congressman Goldman, and my new friend just west of me on Long Island, Congressman D'Esposito. He has a lot of constituents that are being taken care of with the World Trade Center health program right now. The people standing up here today with me, and many who are no longer here with us, worked to establish the World Trade Center health program to provide much-needed care for those who are exposed to deadly fumes and debris. I thank them for this important work that you've already done. Today, the World Trade Center health program provides medical treatment and monitoring for over 120,000 first responders and survivors, spanning every state and, as you heard, all but one congressional district. But at a time when more Americans than ever before are suffering from 9/11 related illnesses, the World Trade Center health program is facing a funding shortage that could leave the very people we promised to care for out in the cold. Now we need to finish the job to fulfill our promise once and for all, and like we said back then, never forget. I want to acknowledge someone here, one of those heroes who's here today with us, Jamie Atkinson, who was just a couple years older than me in high school from Sayville. He was just 19 years old on 9/11. He was an EMT in Sayville at the time, and like so many Americans, didn't hesitate to answer the call and headed to ground zero to help the cleanup and rescue efforts. Today, he is fighting a very rare stage of stage 4 cancer, has had numerous major surgeries, chemotherapy, has had organs removed. The cost of his medical care is in the millions. We need to fix the shortfall for Jamie and the tens of thousands of people like him who rely on this program for their health care. With the bipartisan bicameral legislation we introduced today, we will close the funding gap and ensure adequate funding for years to come. Let me be clear. This is not a New York problem, but an American problem. just as 9/11 was not just an attack on our city, but our values as a country. Today, I am making a direct appeal to my colleagues in both the House and the Senate. Look inward, do the right thing, support this legislation, and help us live up to our commitments. The time for action is now. Thank you. And I'd like to turn the podium over to my colleague, Representative Nadler.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you all for being here today. Over 20 years ago, on September 11, 2001, our nation was devastated by the deadliest attack in our history, killing almost 3,000 people in a single day and wounding thousands more. More people died that day than died at Pearl Harbor. Since then, we have made the following promise to responders and survivors. As a nation, we will never forget their sacrifice that day or in the weeks and months after. And they will never have to question whether the federal government supports them. To help fulfill this promise, I was proud to lead, along with Carol Maloney, our former colleague, the fight in passing the James Zadroga and Peter King, our former colleague, in passing this James Zadroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act, which finally passed in 2010, which created the World Trade Center Health Program to care for respondents and survivors, and reopened the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund to provide compensation to those who are sick or passed away from a 9/11-related illness. Sadly, today, more than 110,000 responders and residents, students and office workers are sick with 9/11-related illnesses. And that number is increasing, and I'm afraid will continue to increase. We have a moral obligation to make sure these people are cared for. However, we are dangerously close to losing our ability to do that. This ever-increasing number of affected people reflects the urgent need to strengthen the World Trade Center Health Program that we established in the Zadroga legislation, and to ensure that we can continue to protect the thousands of responders and survivors from 9/11-related illnesses. Congress established this program to provide medical treatment and monitoring for responders and survivors who live in every state and nearly every congressional district. We must ensure that 9/11 first responders and survivors can access critical health services for decades to come. I'm immensely proud that $1 billion in federal funding for the program was included in the fiscal year 2023 omnibus legislation we passed last December. However, more must be done to guarantee full funding once and for all. That's why I'm proud to join Representatives Garbarino, Goldman, and Desposito, and Senators Gillibrand and Schumer in leading the call to fully fund the World Trade Center Health Program and to ensure that survivors and responders struggling with 9/11 illnesses have access to the care they need and deserve for decades to come. This legislation will guarantee that in the future, no responder, survivor, or family member who lost a loved one will have to come to Congress asking them to live up to their promise. I want to thank the advocates, the survivors, and leaders who have joined us today for their support as we fight for this funding, as we fought for this funding and continue to fight for this funding. And I'm glad that we are one step closer to keeping the World Trade Center Health Program available for all who need it. And next speaker is Senator Menendez.
Well, thank you. Good morning. 22 years ago, on a cloudless morning, nearly 3,000 Americans, including 750 from my home state of New Jersey, were senselessly murdered in the terrorist attacks on September 11th, one of the darkest days in our nation's history. Americans were targeted because they sang our national anthem, pledged allegiance to our flag, and across the Potomac, they were attacked because they served in uniform and defended our Constitution. And in the case of our brave first responders, they gave their lives while rushing towards danger, running into burning buildings where others were rushing away. In the years since the attack, the phrase "never forget" has been seared into our national conscience. It's our solemn duty to remember the fallen, not just through words, but through concrete deeds and actions. It is our oath, one that requires us to care for every 9/11 survivor, as well as every first responder struggling with the lingering health effects of that fateful day. As my colleagues have mentioned, the bipartisan legislation we're unveiling upholds this oath. It is an oath that I have taken from the very first day that we started with the Zadroga Act. Jim Zadroga was actually a New Jersey resident. It's our promise to the more than 120,000 responders and survivors from the World Trade Center, Pentagon, and United 93 crash site. And it also deals with addressing not only the looming shortfall so that we never fail in our commitment to them, it also takes care of fixing the funding formula and ensuring its solvency once and for all. And it corrects an oversight that denied benefits for the 9/11 heroes who responded to the Pentagon and Shanksville sites. I say all the time that when we say never forget, for that to have meaning, it means never forget not only in commemoration, which we should do every year, it means by action to take care of the health care of the survivors and the first responders. It is a hollow promise to go to a 9/11 commemoration and vote against the efforts to fund the health care of all of those survivors. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to truly be committed to that oath of never forgetting and making sure that we take care of the health care of all of those who responded on that fateful day, all of those who were affected through no fault of their own, all of those who continue to face the lingering consequences. That's how you honor those individuals. And that means casting your vote for the legislation we're talking about. With that, let me introduce Representative D'Esposito.
Well, thank you, Senator. Good morning, everyone. This morning, I stand really wearing two hats. I think I am only the second member of the New York City Police Department to serve in Congress, and I think the first NYPD detective. So I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you to everyone here, past and present, who have supported the men and women who valiantly defended our nation and our city on 9/11. You see, I rode a patrol car with individuals who suffered from 9/11 illness. I investigated homicides with those who lost their life because of diseases that they contracted working on the pile. I'm a 21-year member of the Nassau County Fire Service, the same fire service that Ray Pfeiffer served for so many years. I represent the district that Lou and Laney Alvarez live in. Surrounded by people, good people, who went to work on a beautiful Tuesday morning and never thought that years later they would be suffering like they are. And to echo the words of Senator Menendez, whenever we get around a time where people want to remind you not to forget, when cops are killed on the line of duty, firefighters are killed on 9/11, there's hundreds of thousands, millions of tweets, Instagram posts, Facebook, T-shirts, bracelets, never forget. Well, let's do that. And I urge all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, because this isn't a Republican issue, it's not a Democrat issue, it's not a New York City issue, this is an American issue. And we owe it to these great Americans who have died and are dying because of an attack on this great nation. We owe it to them. We owe it to people like Ray Pfeiffer, like Lou Alvarez, like so many who have fought so hard for the people who continue to be sick and die because of that day. So I'm thankful to be part of this group, and I will, each and every day, work as hard as I possibly can on both sides of the aisle so that we could deliver, so that we can truly say on each 9/11, when people say never forget, well, the people here with me standing with us, we make sure that we're never going to forget. And we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that our colleagues on both sides of the aisle do the same thing and we deliver for the victims of 9/11. And now I'd like to turn it over to Senator Booker.
Thank you, Congressman. It is an honor to be standing up here surrounded by these individuals extraordinary colleagues of mine who have led on these issues. It's an honor to be standing up here with these extraordinary men and women, heroes. Men and women who have been showing who they are by what they do. It is an honor to be standing up here, but I am frustrated to be standing up here. I mean, when we have Americans of this caliber coming down to the Capitol of the United States to have to ask members of Congress to do what is their duty to do. Nobody here is asking for charity. They're asking us to fulfill our oath and our promise. I was taught as a young man that you are not defined by what happens to you, but by how you respond. Well, when terrorists attacked this country, brave men and women like those standing around me right now defined the character of this country by responding. Despite the peril, despite the danger, despite the threats to their health and the risk to their families, they responded with heroism and strength. And so, how will we respond? This bill is not asking for more than what is just and right that a nation should do when terrorists test us. Will we stand and support those who supported us? And this bill is not just about the New York and New Jersey area. It's also about right here at the Capitol of the United States of America, right at the Pentagon, to make sure we include those folks who responded to that crisis and that emergency as well. When you say you love America, it is not about a profession of words. It is not about symbols. It is not about salutes. It's about what you do for this nation. This is a bill that demands what is just, what is right. It is the duty of Congress to show the world who we are. And I believe, like my colleagues have said, that we will not rest until we fully fund the health care for those who responded and their families. Thank you. And now I want to bring up a dear friend of mine right across the Hudson River, Representative Dan Goldman.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Thank you, Senator Gillibrand, for being such a strong advocate for this. Representative Garbarino, it's a pleasure to work with you and Congressman D'Esposito, and of course, my colleague to the north of me, Congressman Nadler, Senator Schumer, Booker, and Menendez. Thank you all for supporting this. I lived in Lower Manhattan on 9/11, and I will never forget going to the top of my apartment building and watching the second plane slam into the World Trade Center. I won't forget the mountain of rubble and the smoke that continued for days and days. I won't forget the lineup along the West Side Highway in Lower Manhattan of ambulance after ambulance after ambulance, hoping that they could take some people to a hospital, and they just stood there idly for days. I also won't forget the promises that were made to the survivors and especially the first responders that ground zero, that the pile was safe from toxins. But now, more than 20 years later, we know that that promise was false. And we are still dealing, 20 years later, with the fallout, the medical fallout of that false promise. It's why the James Zadroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act was such a critical and just piece of legislation for all the reasons that my colleagues have said. It enabled hundreds of thousands of 9/11 first responders and survivors, many of whom are standing with us here today, including my dear friend Mariama James, whose mother just passed away from 9/11 illness. They sustained physical, mental injuries that day that continue to be discovered because of that terrorist attack. The Zadroga Act was a clarion call to moral action, but it is a call that has not lessened in urgency as time has passed. And we now know that the costs of the medical treatment have far outpaced the Zadroga Act's funding, and we're facing a shortfall. And we have a choice. We have a choice now between funding health care for those who sacrificed their lives in defense of our nation, or letting them go without the funding to pay for their medical care. It is a simple choice. Do we support those who defended our country that day and in the weeks following, or do we abandon them? There's no heroism here, as Senator Booker said, in fighting for this legislation. The true heroes, to whom we all owe an unpayable debt of gratitude, are standing here behind me. It would give this country and our democracy a bad and terrible name if we were not able to look them in the eye and say that we as a nation will make sure that they get the health care that they need and deserved. They've unfortunately been forced time and time again to travel down to Washington to advocate for their basic health care needs that they need now because they went towards that pile to help our country recover from those terrible terrorist attacks. The challenge that we all face here today is to make this the last group of advocates and activists and responders and survivors come down to Washington. They should not have to make this trip anymore. We owe them at least that much. And so I'm grateful to be up here with our colleagues from New York and New Jersey to advocate for this funding. But this is truly an American issue, and we will not rest until we pass this legislation. Thank you. Now, I want to introduce John Field, a terrific 9/11 advocate.
Just some housekeeping notes. Ray Pfeiffer was my best friend. There's 122,000 people in the World Trade Center health program. You guys have other jobs. I have one. Everybody behind me, you have another job. I've given you guys 20 years of my life. So I read this bill several times. And nowhere in this bill does it say there's over 25,000 people with a certified cancer. By 2025, there'll be 35,000 people with a certified cancer. Nowhere in this bill does it say we double those who died that day. We don't outnumber those people that day. We double in death that day. So when given statistics and facts, man, make them count, because the facts don't lie. We talk about fighting and winning. We shouldn't have to fight. We were fucking lied to 20 years ago when they said the air was safe to breathe. We're coming down here, wrap your arms around this, people. We're coming down here fighting for health care when we were lied to. Does that make sense? So we talk about winning. Where's the win when we're losing people like Ray Pfeiffer or Lou Alvarez or Johnny Mack? Where's the win when you go to someone's hospital bed and they say, make sure my family's taken care of? There's no win here. But there can be justice by getting this done now. Don't wait till 2027. Because if I have to keep coming down here, trust me, a lot of people don't want me here. And people behind me don't want me here. Where's the win? You know, we're a finite number, the 9/11 community. We're getting smaller every day. We want to be left alone. Leave us alone. Get this done now. Don't wait to the end of the year where it's politically good for that person. You guys, you elected officials, no offense. You work for us. You work for us. We don't work for you. So when you give your speech and you say to your colleagues across the aisle, go sit down with your colleague across the aisle. and say, get on board. We don't want to fight. We don't want to win. This isn't an American thing. This isn't a Republican thing. This is fucking humanity. It's fucking humanity. People are sick and dying, and we're all in this little sweatbox talking about people that are sick and dying. These are really hard things to wrap your arms around. I love you. I would die for you. I don't want to see you no more. I don't want to be here no more. I want to call you and say, hey, how's Jonathan and the boys? You want to get a Jameson? I don't want to talk about 9/11. I don't want to talk about burn pits. I want to talk about life. My life for the last 20 years has been this. I gave up 20 years of my life for this. I'm done. We get this done now in the near future, or I'm going to make this place a living hell. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ed Kelly, our General President of the United Association of Firefighters.
Thank you very much, Senator, and thank you, Johnny, for your fight, 20 years. God bless you, brother. You're a champion. You're a hero for us. And thank you to Leader Schumer for all of your steadfast leadership over the years. And Senator Gillibrand, Senator Booker, Senator Menendez, all of our members of Congress who have always stood by doing the right thing. Make no mistake about it, on September 11, 2001, this nation was attacked. The brunt of that attack was felt in Lower Manhattan due to the heroics, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and the Pentagon across the river here. And it doesn't escape me that the hallowed hills of Arlington National Cemetery, where our nation's heroes are memorialized, bore witness to the greatest attack on our freedom since December 7th, 1941. And in the wake of Pearl Harbor, the citizenry, just like they did in the wake of 9/11, ran to our nation's defense. It didn't escape us on the pile at Ground Zero that the air we were breathing was dangerous. I remember a battalion chief in FDNY saying, the air we're breathing is probably going to kill more of us than the 343 that perished on that day. And he was right. There was a time during that response that we didn't have equipment. We didn't have respirators. And even when we had PPE, it wasn't 100% field-proof. We still got exposed. You know, we're in the second month of the year 2023. And already we've lost 9 members of the FDNY to World Trade Center-related illness. Think about that for a minute. And as Leader Schumer so eloquently mentioned, we've been walking these halls for decades. And many of those we walked with, like my pal Ray Pfeiffer, who actually rolled in the end because he needed a wheelchair, they fought for what was right, just like we did on 9/11, 9/12. We have one simple ask of Congress. Do the right thing. Make sure our nation is there for those who are there for our nation. Fund this legislation. And above all, show our character. Show who we are as a people and that we live, that we'll never forget. God bless our fallen and God bless those fighting now. Thank you. I'd now like to bring up my friend Jimmy McCarthy, the president of the Uniformed Fire Officers Association of New York City.
Good morning. We represent over 7,000 fire officers, active and retired. All of them responded to the Trade Center on that day. I want to thank all the leadership in Congress for what they've done in the past, and